The Pemberton Assembly was not a place Eleanor Ashbourne attended by choice. She attended because her father had 3 carriages, 2 daughters, and 1 ambition. And on the night Lord James Vane came to Derbyshire, all 3 of those things pointed directly at the Assembly Hall doors. Nell had suggested, mildly, that she might remain at home with a book and a headache. Her mother had looked at her with an expression that communicated without words that this was not the kind of suggestion that warranted a response. Nell had put on the gray dress, her only acceptable dress, the one Sophia had called sensible in the voice she used for things she considered beneath her, and gotten into the carriage. Sophia went first. She always did. Sophia had golden hair that caught candlelight in ways that seemed almost deliberate, a laugh that carried just far enough to be heard across a room, and the particular gift of making every man she met feel as though he had been personally selected for her attention. She was, by any reasonable accounting, the prettiest girl in the county. Their father had told Lord Vane as much in a letter that Nell had not been meant to read. She had read it anyway. She had a habit of being in rooms when things happened that were not supposed to happen in front of her. It was one of the few advantages of being the daughter no one tracked. Lord Vane arrived at 8:30. The room adjusted itself the way rooms do when someone important enters. Conversation softened, bodies turned, a collective recalibration of attention that moved through the assembly like a slow tide. Nell, standing near the east window with a glass of warm lemonade she had no intention of drinking, watched it happen and found it quietly depressing. He was taller than she had expected, broader in the shoulder. He moved through the introductions with the practiced ease of a man who had done this 100 times and had long ago stopped needing to perform it. He shook hands, he nodded. He smiled when smiling was required. And then his eyes moved across the room, not hunting, not performing, just looking, the way a man looks when he is trying to understand where he has arrived and what it means. They landed on Nell for exactly 2 seconds. She looked away first, not from shyness, from principle. She had made a private decision some years ago that she would not be one of the women who watched the door. Her father found Lord Vane within 4 minutes of his arrival. Nell timed it from the window. She could not hear the words across the room, but she knew them by heart. She had read the letter. She knew the pitch, the arrangement of compliments, the careful architecture of expectation her father had spent 3 pages constructing. Sophia curtsied. The candlelight did its work. Lord Vane bowed with perfect correctness, and the room breathed out in quiet satisfaction, and Nell turned back to the window and the dark garden beyond it, where at least nothing was trying to be chosen. She was studying a frost pattern on the glass when footsteps stopped behind her. She assumed it was her mother. Her mother had an uncanny talent for appearing whenever Nell looked too comfortable being alone, but when she turned, it was not her mother. Lord Vane stood 2 feet away, holding his own glass of something that was certainly not lemonade, watching her with an expression she could not immediately classify.
I don't believe we were introduced.
We weren't.
Your father presented me to your sister. I noticed he didn't bring me to this side of the room.
My father is an efficient man. He doesn't spend time on things he doesn't consider necessary.
There was a pause. He did not look offended. He looked, if anything, more attentive.
And you didn't think to introduce yourself?
I didn't think you'd be over here.
Why not?
Because Sophia is over there.
He looked at her for a moment. Then something shifted in his face, not quite a smile, but the quiet suggestion of one.
I'm Lord James Vane.
I know who you are.
And you are?
Eleanor Ashbourne. Nell, the other one.
She said it plainly, without self-pity. It was simply the accurate description of her position in the family geography, and she had made her peace with it long ago. Or so she told herself on most days.
The other one.
He repeated it slowly, as if testing the weight of the phrase.
It isn't a complaint. It's a fact. Sophia is the one people see. I'm the one who's usually by the window.
I noticed
That I was by the window.
that you were the only person in the room who didn't look up when I came in.
Nell said nothing for a moment. That was true, and she hadn't realized he had seen it.
I apologize if that was rude.
It wasn't? It was the most interesting thing that's happened to me since July.
Mr. Ashbourne appeared at Lord Vane's elbow with the speed of a man who had been watching from across the room and did not like what he was watching. His color was slightly higher than usual. His smile was slightly wider than comfortable. "My lord," he said, breathing harder than was entirely dignified. "I see that is, Sophia was just saying she hoped you might. May I escort you back to?"
I was hoping Miss Eleanor might give me the next dance.
The silence that followed had a specific texture. It was the silence of a man who had written 3 pages promising the prettiest daughter and was now watching those 3 pages become irrelevant in front of an east window. Nell looked at her father. Her father looked at Lord Vane. Lord Vane looked at Nell and waited.
If you like.
She said it with no warmth and no coldness. It was simply the honest answer, and she had learned early that dishonest warmth tended to create problems that outlasted the evening. They danced. She was competent. He was considerably better than that, though he clearly preferred not to advertise it. They moved through the figures with the careful correctness of 2 people who were both, for different reasons, done with the ritual of it. Sophia watched from where she stood. Nell didn't look at her, but she felt it. The specific heat of a sister's attention when something has gone unexpectedly sideways.
You dance like someone who learned because it was required.
I did learn because it was required.
So did I.
You're better at pretending to enjoy it.
Years of practice.
They turned. The music moved them in the pattern the evening expected. Candles threw long shadows across the floor. Somewhere to Nell's left, she could hear her mother explaining something to Mrs. Hargreave in a voice that suggested the explanation was not going smoothly.
Can I ask you something directly?
I suspect you will, whether I say yes or not.
Why? You came here for Sophia. My father made that perfectly clear. She is everything you would be expected to want. She is beautiful and accomplished, and she has been trained since the age of 16 for exactly this kind of evening. So why are you here, dancing with me, when I have given you no reason at all?
He was quiet for 4 beats of the music. When he spoke, his voice was lower.
Your father's letter told me precisely what he wanted me to think. It was thorough, complimentary, and almost entirely without a true observation in it.
Sophia is genuinely beautiful.
I didn't say she wasn't. I said the letter told me what your father wanted me to think. When I walked into this room, I looked for the thing that didn't match. You were by the window, you weren't watching the door, and when everyone else turned, you turned away.
That wasn't a performance.
I know. That's precisely why I'm here.
The dance ended. He bowed. She curtsied. They stood for a moment in the small space between the music stopping and the next thing beginning, and the room arranged itself around them without either of them asking it to. If you're enjoying this, drop a like, or leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. It's a small thing, but it helps the platform understand this kind of story is worth finding, and that matters more than you'd think. The days that followed were not comfortable ones. The assembly had not gone unobserved. Assemblies never did. By Friday morning, the version of events in circulation had Lord Vane dancing twice with Nell Ashbourne and once, as a courtesy, with her sister. A sequence which, if accurate, meant something specific in the language the county used for these things. It was not accurate, but it was close enough to function. The county did not require strict accuracy. It required a story shaped well enough to repeat. Mr. Ashbourne said nothing to Nell directly. He said a great deal to her mother, in a low voice and behind closed doors, and Nell heard enough of it through the wall to understand that he was in the process of revising his position from wronged party to satisfied architect. Lord Vane called at Ashbourne House 3 times in the first week. Each time he asked for Nell. Each time Mr. Ashbourne met him in the drawing room with a familiar expression, the expression of a man who is trying to renegotiate an arrangement that has already been made without his consent. Sophia did not speak to Nell directly. She had a more refined approach. She left rooms when Nell entered them. She addressed remarks to their mother that were clearly intended for other ears. She smiled in ways that contained no warmth and required no response. It was skillfully done, and Nell noted the skill without admiring it. Their mother was simply at sea. She had spent 4 years preparing Sophia for a moment precisely like this one. She did not have a framework for what was currently happening, and she resolved this difficulty by pretending that everything was proceeding normally and waiting for reality to catch up with her expectations. Nell, for her part, found the situation inconvenient in ways she had not anticipated. Lord Vane was not what she had expected. He was direct without being blunt. He listened, actually listened, the way very few people did, and he had a dry, unhurried sense of humor that caught her off guard every time she thought she had prepared for it. He asked questions and then waited for the actual answer rather than the polished one. He did not talk about himself unless she asked, and when she asked, he answered without embellishment. She had not tried to find him interesting. It had happened entirely without her cooperation. On the 4th visit, they were permitted the garden. Mrs. Ashbourne sat at a distance of 12 feet with embroidery she was not actually doing.
You're doing it again.
Doing what?
Looking for the reason this is a mistake.
I'm being careful. There's a difference.
You're looking for the trap.
She did not answer immediately, because he was not entirely wrong.
You came here because my father wrote to you. You arrived expecting Sophia. You danced with me because I wasn't watching the door. That's not a foundation. That's a sequence of accidents.
Most things start as accidents. The question is what you do with them afterward.
And what are you proposing to do?
He looked at her with the steady calm of a man who has decided to stop choosing his words carefully and simply say what he means.
I would like to keep coming back, if you'll allow it. Not for the county's satisfaction and not for your father's revised ambitions. For the conversation, for this.
He gestured briefly at the space between them, at the garden and the cold light and the embroidery being ignored at 12 feet distance. It was not a grand declaration. It was something considerably more careful than that, a question asked plainly by a man who had stopped calculating and was waiting to see if she would do the same. Nell thought about the east window, about the 2 seconds before she had looked away, about every room she had stood in for 23 years not being watched, and how strange it felt now to be watched by someone who did not appear to want anything from her except her actual company.
I'll allow it.
She said it with the same direct voice she used for everything, and he smiled, not the assembly smile, not the one for rooms, something quieter and considerably more real. He came twice more that week. The county began to form opinions, which was inevitable. The county always formed opinions. It was one of the things it was best at. On the 2nd visit, they sat in the drawing room with the door open and discussed, of all things, the relative merits of east versus west light for reading. On the 3rd, he brought her a book, not a fashionable one, not the sort of title that would signal taste or cultivation, but a worn copy of something by a naturalist he had read 3 times and thought she might find useful. He handed it over without ceremony and asked what she was currently reading. When she told him, he had an actual opinion about it. They argued for 40 minutes while her mother sat in the corner pretending to be unaware that the conversation had edges. Nell walked him to the door when he left, not because it was required, because she found unexpectedly that she did not want the conversation to end in a room where her mother was present.
Same time Thursday.
If the weather holds.
And if it doesn't?
She considered this for a moment.
Same time Thursday.
He looked at her, the quiet look, the garden one, and nodded once and left. She stood in the entrance hall for a moment after the door closed. She was aware that this was not how she had planned to spend the winter. She was also aware that plans had a tendency to become irrelevant when the actual circumstances arrived. Nell did not read the county's opinions. She had never found them useful. What she did read, when she found it tucked beneath a poetry book in the blue drawing room on a Tuesday morning, was a letter. It was addressed to a man named Harwick, a solicitor from the neighboring parish, recently married, with a reputation that made his name useful for exactly this kind of construction. It was signed Eleanor Ashbourne. The handwriting was almost hers, almost with the telltale slant of her H reproduced and the tightness of her E's approximated, close enough to be convincing to anyone who did not know both sisters well. The content was specific and calculated and entirely false. It described a private arrangement. It implied a history. It was the kind of letter that, once circulated, required no proof and no elaboration. Society did not need proof. Society needed a story shaped well enough to fit the space where doubt already lived. And this one fit. Nell stood in the blue drawing room for a long moment, the letter in her hands, the cold morning light coming flat through the curtains. She thought about going to her father. She considered it for the length of 3 breaths and set it aside. Her father's response to information of this kind was to manage it toward the outcome that suited him, not toward the truth. She thought about going to Lord Vane. She considered this longer and more carefully, and she understood why it appealed to her and why she would not do it. She set the letter on the table. She sat down in the blue chair. She thought through the mechanics of it, where it had come from, where it was going, where it would land, and when. She was methodical about it, the way she was methodical about most things when the room wasn't watching. It was not rage she felt. It was something colder and more useful, a kind of clarity. Sophia had always been the one everyone watched. But Sophia had also been watching Nell, it turned out, with considerably more attention than Nell had known. She had watched long enough to learn the handwriting, long enough to understand what to put in the letter and who to send it to. What she had not understood, what she had underestimated, was that Nell had spent 23 years in rooms where things happened and no one checked whether she was paying attention. She had been paying attention. The Thursday card party at Hargreave House was not an unusual event. Mrs. Hargreave hosted it monthly with the reliable conviction that social gatherings required a focal point, and that focal point was generally her drawing room and whatever information was currently moving through the county. The letter, Nell had determined, was moving. She could trace its path by the way people looked at her, the half-second delay before a greeting, the quality of a smile that was manufacturing friendliness rather than feeling it. 2 invitations failed to arrive. The vicar's wife was brief. Mrs. Hargreave, when they passed in the village on Wednesday, had looked at Nell with an expression that was almost not quite pity. It would land at the Thursday table. That was where things of this kind landed. Over cards, in a warm room, in front of the people whose opinions functioned as the county's official record, not loud, not cruel in any manner that could be named directly, just placed. The way you place a stone that doesn't need to be thrown to do its work. Lord Vane had been invited. Before leaving the house, she had gone to her correspondence box and chosen 3 letters, her own written over 3 years, in her actual hand. The H with its particular slant, the E that always closed too tightly, differences invisible unless you were looking, and obvious the moment you were. She put them in her reticule and went to Hargreave House. She arrived before the room filled.
No.
She chose a chair near the wall with a clear line of sight to the door, the principal card table, and Mrs. Hargreave's corner, and she sat with her hands in her lap and waited. Lord Vane arrived at 7. He scanned the hall with the quiet efficiency she had come to recognize, found her, and his expression shifted slightly. She was not where she was supposed to be. She was not invisible. He crossed to her.
You're sitting differently than usual.
I'm sitting in a chair.
You're sitting in a chair like someone who has made a decision.
3 weeks, and he already knew the difference between her ordinary stillness and her deliberate kind. She noted this and filed it, and kept her eyes on Mrs. Hargreave's corner. Mrs. Hargreave had begun to move. She stopped first at the corner table, 3 women whose collective opinion constituted, functionally, the county's understanding of what was true and what was not. Nell watched her lean in. She watched the angle of it. She stood up.
Nell?
She crossed the room at a pace that was just below urgency, fast enough to arrive, measured enough not to create alarm, and she reached the corner before the second sentence was finished.
Mrs. Hargreave, I'm so glad I caught you. I've been meaning to address something directly, if you'll permit me.
The corner went quiet. Everything around it did not, which was exactly what Nell needed. Enough witness, but not a scene.
I understand there is a letter circulating that bears my name and my hand. I wanted you to hear from me, before you heard from anyone else, that I am aware of it. I know where it came from, and I know it is false.
Mrs. Hargreave looked at her with the expression of a woman whose planned timing has been disrupted by someone who was not supposed to be paying attention.
I don't ask you to take my word alone. I ask only that you compare what is circulating with what I can show you.
She set the 3 letters on the table carefully, without drama, her own correspondence, 3 years of it, in her actual handwriting, the H, the E, the slight leftward lean that the forged letter had almost caught and had not quite managed. Mrs. Hargreave picked up the circulating letter. She picked up one of Nell's. She looked at them for a long moment. The room had not stopped, but the corner of it had. Lord Vane had not moved from where she'd left him. He was watching, and his expression was something she hadn't seen before, not the assembly expression, not the garden expression, something that had not been arranged. Mrs. Hargreave set both letters down. She said nothing for a long moment. Then she placed them side by side on the table and looked at Nell with an expression that had lost its planned quality entirely. That was all that was needed. The architecture of the evening rearranged itself without announcement, and by the time the first hand was dealt, the letter had ceased to be a useful thing. Nell returned to her chair. Lord Vane sat down beside her, close enough to speak without being heard.
How long have you known?
2 days.
You waited.
I needed to let it travel far enough to identify its path, and I needed it to fail in front of people, not in private. Private resolutions get reinterpreted. Public ones are harder to revise.
He was quiet for a moment, and she thought he might say something carefully worded. He didn't.
You could have told me.
I know.
Why didn't you?
She looked at the card tables, at the ordinary business of a Thursday evening that had been something else an hour ago.
Because I have spent a considerable portion of my life watching other people manage things on my behalf, or failing to. I needed to know I could do this myself. Before anything else, I needed to know that first.
He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the first card hand finished and things shifted around them without either of them moving. Then, without any announcement, he took her hand. Not the formal arrangement of a dance, not gloved protocol. Her hand briefly in his. He held it for the length of a breath and then let go, because there were limits to what could be done in a card room in Hargreave House without becoming the next thing that moved through the county.
For the record, I'm not going anywhere.
She looked at him.
I know.
She said it differently this time. Not the assembly voice, not the window voice, something that had not been used in quite a while. Sophia left for her aunt's house in Bath the following week. There was no confrontation, no scene, only a carriage, a trunk, and the kind of silence that settles when something that needed to end has finally ended. Mr. Ashbourne made his peace with circumstances the way practical men do, by finding a version of events in which the outcome had been, in some sense, his intention all along. This required a certain creative latitude, but he had always had that. Lord Vane came to Ashbourne House one last time. He spoke to Mr. Ashbourne in the study for 20 minutes. When he came out, he found Nell in the garden, not at the window this time, just standing in the pale winter light with her hands at her sides.
It's settled.
I assumed it would be.
You could appear marginally more surprised.
I could. I'm choosing not to.
He laughed. A real one, not arranged, not assembled for a room. The laugh of a man who had stopped needing the other version of himself. She had not tried to be chosen. She had spent the better part of her life in rooms where things happened, standing at windows, watching with the careful attention of someone who expected nothing in particular and had therefore seen everything clearly. She had watched Sophia be chosen and praised and placed at the center of every room they shared. She had watched the machinery of expectation operate with its usual precision and had accepted, over many years, that her position in the arrangement was fixed. What she had not accounted for was someone who walked into any room already tired of the machinery. It had turned out to be enough, more than enough. It had turned out to be the exact thing. The quiet ones always see more than people assume. That's either a warning or a love story, depending on which side of the window you're standing on. I'd like to ask you something, and I hope you'll leave your answer in the comments. Most of us know what it is to be overlooked, to stand somewhere while the room is busy choosing someone else. But was there ever a moment when being invisible actually protected you? When it let you see something, or reach something, or become something that you wouldn't have found if people had been watching? Leave it below. Those stories are worth telling.